Rich Paul fires back at some of the narrative around Zach LaVine. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, I want to talk about this with the Bulls rebuilding their roster, but keeping Billy Donovan. What are the merits to keeping him, and why some Bulls fans are asking, why is he still here if the Bulls are going to go through a full rebuild, which I do think is a fair question. We're also going to talk about how nobody knows what the future of DeMar DeRozan is and why, no matter what Lonzo Ball does this season, probably his last one in the Bulls uniform. We'll get into all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go and get into this content for today. So we got word from Rich Paul, Zach LaVine's agent, the guy who run Clutch Sports, and we haven't really heard much from Zach LaVine or his representation since this whole offseason went down with a lot of the trade talks, things like that. And Rich Paul said this. I want to make this clear and clear. This whole idea that Zach has been anything but professional in this situation is false. The guy's played hurt. He has represented the franchise with class. A lot has taken place during his time with the Bulls that he's taken the high road on every time. Does every player get frustrated at times? Yes. But Zach has been the ultimate professional and deserves better. The Bulls have business to do, and we're letting them handle their business. Now, you can take that and read into that what you will, and there will be many content creators that read into it deeper than probably what I'm going to do right now. This is, to me, simply put, an agent trying to help the value of his client. That's just what it is. And that's what he should be doing. I want to make no mistake about it. Nothing that Rich Paul said here was bad. If Rich Paul came out and completely damned the organization and said, oh, well, we've been open to a trade to XYZ, the Bulls are the one dragging, that type of thing, I would be, this is a pretty straightforward and I would say fair. Like Zach LaVine has dealt with all the ups and downs and ebbs and flows that have come with the Chicago Bulls franchise. From the Gar Pax era, which he came in on the tail end of that, until now this AK and Eversley era. He's dealt with it. And even though there's been some excitement around the team, and a lot of Bulls fans will go with the more controversial route of saying, well, they took the ball out of his hands with DeMar DeRozan coming, and to a degree, yeah, but you needed to win. And Zach LaVine, to his credit, embraced that, right? Yeah, like, we've seen it. Zach LaVine tried to do it by himself for, 5 years? It did not work. You're not going to get a team around you that's not going to somewhat take the ball out of your hands and give other people opportunities. Now, you could say with how much DeMar had to do some of the ball handling and things like that, it is what it is. But they also put probably the best backcourt mate on paper next to Zach LaVine possible in Lonzo Ball, but Lonzo just couldn't stay healthy. And this is why in my video, think late last week, I talked about, I understand it from both sides. The organization has failed Zach in a lot of ways, and Zach LaVine, through either it being health, his performance, not elevating his game to number one status, has also failed the organization in some ways. But ultimately, this thing has come down to, as Rich Paul says, the Bulls have business to do, and they're letting them do the business. And the business that the Bulls are, as they have made their decision via what we've heard. It could be very different, but via what we've heard so far is that they look at it as a worst case scenario of Zach still being on this roster by opening day. This is a franchise that is ready to go younger. They're ready to fully dive into this new roster that they're building, and they don't want any of the lingering things around it if they can avoid it via especially Zach LaVine. Now, I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with that. I actually do think, looking at some places on this roster, you can see where Zach LaVine would absolutely fit in and help this roster. But then again, we don't even know if winning is necessarily the focus right now of the Chicago Bulls roster overall, which is another conversation we need to have at some point as well. So Rich Paul coming out and defending his client is, like I said, it's what an agent should do. I read this. I didn't feel any type of way about it. And, while we even have a voicemail from 8 Lives, which we'll get into at the end of the show, where he's kind of, I won't say harsh, but kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum than I am on this whole Zach LaVine front office kind of issues, and we'll play that. But I think just looking at where it sits right now, it's in a very flat out place. The Bulls are looking to move on from Zach LaVine. Now, I would say this, and I've been saying this now for over the last couple of days, it looks less and less likely that's going to happen. Zach LaVine is probably going to start his season off on the Chicago Bulls roster. And that may be the best thing in the long run for both sides. Yeah, the Bulls are ready to go younger. They want to give these opportunities and make sure that Kobe White, Patrick Williams, even Mattis Busilis, Josh Giddey have the most opportunities with the ball to develop. But, revamping Zach LaVine's value is best for both sides, because then Zach would hopefully be able to go to the destination of his ultimate choosing, and the Bulls will be able to get more back in the trade right now for Zach LaVine. And that's if he even revamps the value. There could absolutely, I want to be clear here, where I initially came in and I thought that this offseason Zach LaVine was going to be traded, that they would just take any deal for Zach LaVine because they're ready to move off of it. It seems like this thing may actually go, and we may not be talking about a Zach LaVine trade until next offseason. Like, there is as low as the trade market is for Zach LaVine, it seems like that may be the thing. Like, I didn't believe that the trade market was that dead for Zach. And it's the contract. Like I said, if Zach LaVine was on a $25 to $28 million contract, this would have been all over and done with by now. But with the new CBA paired with the doubt around Zach LaVine, if you're going, and don't get me wrong, every year that goes by, Zach LaVine's contract looks like more of a steal, as $200 million contracts are going to become more and more the norm. Hell, we just saw the first $300 million contract. So as those things happen, and of course, as Zach LaVine's contract has less years on it, it's going to look better over time. But, when you have those doubts, as well as the new CBA, everything has just been in this perfect storm to end up on. Zach LaVine's market just is not where I think either side expected it to be at this point in time. And that's something that they're going to have to figure out. But let me know what you guys think. How did you feel about Rich Paul's comments in regards to Zach LaVine and this whole trade saga with the Chicago Bulls? Let me know all that down below. Now, with that said, I want to move into something that, it was reported that one of the things that Zach LaVine did not like about, where this Bulls franchise was headed is the fact that Billy Donovan was still the head coach, that reportedly him being benched, that rift between him and Billy Donovan, still professional, but that's kind of one of the biggest rifts there, more so than what it was the front office initially. And a lot of you guys have been raising the question in the comment section so far that if we're rebuilding, why is Billy Donovan still here? And I'm going to give kind of the reasons to both sides. And this is something that I really don't have an opinion on. I have an opinion on it, but it's not the worst thing in the world to still have Billy Donovan as the coach here initially to start this off. It could be, right? It could end up that. And we'll talk about why here in a second. But so what are the merits for both keeping and moving on from Billy Donovan, right? Of course, Bulls fans have looked at what Billy Donovan's coaching has been the last few years, and ultimately they just think Billy ain't it. And he's not the guy who can come up with the scheme, who can develop players, because he's typically a guy who he either relies heavily on his stars or he needs a point guard playing at a high level for Billy Donovan's system to look the best. Now, the Bulls did acquire a point guard in Josh Giddey that theoretically, Billy Donovan's probably going to utilize a lot, especially with the playmaking ability that Josh Giddey has to, develop Josh Giddey, but also to help his system look the best. But then you got to think of, all right, we have had players in Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White, Patrick Williams, Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips. I guess you can say Dama Sanogo, even though he spent most of the time in the G League. But just those 6 players, right, that you've looked at over these last 3 years and have said that, yeah, Kobe White and Ayo developed a lot last season, but some people give it the work that they put in the offseason more so than that. Patrick Williams has basically started since he came here, then started getting in and out of the lineup, hasn't really progressed his game the way that players have hoped. And then you have the thing of Billy Donovan not playing rookies. Now, if you go younger, Billy Donovan's going to have to play the young guys. It's part of why, I think the Bulls don't look to keep DeMar back. They are trying to move Zach LaVine because it is, what have I always called it? You have to cushion insulate the roster against Billy Donovan's dumbass decisions is sometimes what. And in having a fully young roster, you force Billy Donovan to play some of the young guys, right? Now, the question on development is there. They brought in a player development staff. They do have coaches behind Billy Donovan and Dan Craig and I forgot the other guy's name off the top of my head that the 2 assistant coaches that we brought in that both have been head of player development in other places in Miami and in Denver. So that brings about its own questions there, right? As far as, well, maybe Billy Donovan isn't the coach to develop guys, but we brought in guys who have developed Jamal Murray, Jokic, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, right? These guys have been really instrumental in the development. Jamal Murray in those guys. So maybe you're hoping they can come over and do some of the similar things here. I get the thought process behind that. But the risk of Billy Donovan staying is that, as far as negatively, is that you could waste 2 years of development. If Billy Donovan is not the guy to develop these young guys, you could waste 2 years. And in those 2 years, you got to come up with contract extensions for Josh Giddey And at some now, Julian Phillips is more than 2 years away, as he was just a rookie last year. So you got to come up with at least a contract extension for Julian Phillips. And you brought in Mattis Bucilis. Do you really want to start off Bucilis, who has one of the higher upsides in this draft? Do you want to possibly waste 2 years of development with Billy Donovan if we just don't trust that Billy is the guy to develop young players? Now, I will say this. Initially, when they brought in Billy Donovan, keep in mind, they told us that they were going to build this thing organically through the draft over time, and they looked at Billy Donovan and said that that was the coach to do that. So the front office's mindset may be, yeah, we initially brought Billy Donovan in here because we trusted his ability to develop and evaluate talent, and then we moved into a different direction where we moved into trying to win now mode. So that's kind of the merits for and against, and it's a risk either way. Either Billy Donovan is going to come in here and help these players develop winning mindsets, like as far as understanding how to operate the game, fitting together, right? Bringing some of that vision. Or he's going to come in here and possibly waste 2 years of development from these young guys who you are hoping are going to be part of the future core of your Chicago Bulls franchise. Again, not to say that anybody on this roster right now is maybe going to turn into a star or superstar, but much like the Bulls did with Kirk Heinrich, Ben Gordon, Luol Deng, they developed those guys, and then when they finally got lucky and got their superstar in Derrick Rose, they had players that had learned to win, learned to play together, learned to win together. But those players were also versatile. And then Derrick Rose helped take them off into the stratosphere. Like that's kind of the hope when you're building over time, right? Is that you're not gonna every draft pick for you isn't gonna turn into a star. But if you develop those players and get the most out of them and know exactly who they are, by the time you get your star, you're off running. And so I get it. There's a risk in keeping Billy Donovan. There's also a risk in or there's some possible reward in that. It's 2 years. It's 2 years left on Billy Donovan's contract, and maybe it's false hope for me. Maybe it's my PTSD, me trying to rationalize some of this. Is that my hope is that's also 2 years not only to evaluate the young talent, but to evaluate what Billy Donovan and how he is developing the young talent now, and then maybe pivot. And whatever that means, I still think I still think just with how Billy Donovan. How he's in with the Reinsdorfs now, he'll probably still be around the franchise in some shape, form, or fashion. But you may at that point move on. And 2 years is a long time, though, especially for development of young guys. That's 2 seasons. So I understand the doubt and the kind of concern from some Bulls fans of we're rebuilding, but we kept the coach. Why do that? And we'll see. We'll see, guys. I know a lot of Bulls fans hold out hope for other coaches and things like that. And my thought process has always been I would love to see the Bulls develop or find the next great coach. Not necessarily, and I know some, we try to do that with Hoiberg. I don't give a shit about any of that. That's still the most sustainable thing is you find the next great coach, because chasing names usually doesn't result in the process that you want, especially if you're rebuilding your roster, in my personal opinion. But you guys are up to have your own ones on that one. Let's get into the next topic. This one's on DeMar DeRozan. So DeMar DeRozan is still a button issue for the Chicago Bulls. I get many Bulls fans are asking, like, why are we still talking about DeMar so much? He's not a Bull. He's probably not going to be a Bull. And it's because of the options. Like, right now, the Bulls are in a position where probably any team that trades or that signs DeMar DeRozan may try to find a sign and trade option, which the Bulls could then net some assets back. And the DeMar DeRozan, the saga around DeMar is just an interesting one as well, because it's a cautionary tale for understanding what your value is on the market, especially if you're going to be a free agent. And so there's been conflicting reports everywhere between the Kings are a team that could be a sneak to land DeMar DeRozan to, the Bulls are interested in Kevin Huerter, to now saying that we heard yesterday that the Bulls actually don't want to take any contracts back for DeMar DeRozan. So that would mean that a third team would have to get involved if a sign and trade is the opportunity there. And so nobody knows where DeMar DeRozan is going. Now, could we find a resolution to that here soon? Possibly. You would think that every day that goes by, you hopefully get closer to a resolution. The Kings, the Heat, and the Spurs have been the teams that are named the most recently for DeMar DeRozan services. Yes, the Lakers were reported before, but it seems like they may be out of it because they just can't offer without sending out D'Lo, and then you have to find a third team for that. But maybe even mention the Lakers as well. But there are a number of teams mentioned around DeMar DeRozan that all kind of make sense. The Kings could very well be looking for an additional scorer, somebody to come off the bench maybe, because I don't see him starting with him, but we'll see. The Heat, I've always said I trust Heat culture. Like the Heat are one of those franchises that even if they do something that may seem a little questionable on paper, I give the Heat the benefit of the doubt because just in what that franchise has been able to do with the talent that they have, they've been able to kind of maximize on most of it and make things fit. So in Eric Spoelstra also as a coach, I'm always going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And then recently, as of kind of late yesterday, a reunion with the Spurs has been mentioned as well. And considering that they added Chris Paul, that they could be looking to go the playoff route, which there is something to be said that if you're trying to compete for a playoff spot, that also helps the development of your young guys. And so getting Chris Paul there to help the development of Wemby, but then to go from one of the youngest teams in the NBA to adding Chris Paul and DeMar DeRozan in a single offseason would be a wild thing to say, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. So the saga around DeMar DeRozan doesn't seem like it has a clear kind of path. It has multiple paths that it could go, but it doesn't have a clear path. And how the Bulls fit in that really is determined by the team. If the Spurs get involved, let's be clear, they have enough cap space where they can probably offer him a $20 million contract. They don't need the Bulls to get involved in the sign and trade. The Heat and the Kings would need the Bulls to be involved in ways with signing trades. Now, that would end up, if the rumors are to be true, that the Bulls don't want to take back a contract because they want to leave a roster spot open, that would mean that the Bulls are looking to get picks back while rerouting the players, the contracts that come back, to a different team. So that is also something to look out for in here because at that point, you would have to have a team that also has cap space to absorb some of money. So it's a really weird bunch of permutations to get you there. But the DeMar DeRozan saga is one that we'll continue to monitor here at Chicago Bulls Central. So stay on the lookout for that, and we'll see where it goes. Now, with that said as well, I want to talk about this last subject before we get into 8 Lives' voicemail, and that's Lonzo Ball. So many Bulls fans, whether here or on Locked on Bulls, ask, what do you think's how does Lonzo factor into this? Does Josh Giddey starters are going to be Lonzo Ball? What's Lonzo Ball going to be for the future? I'm going to tell you guys right now. And if Lonzo Ball comes back and he's amazing, we can take this segment, we can throw it away. But Lonzo Ball being out of basketball for 2 years, he's not going to come back and be an impact player right away. He's played 35 games in 3 seasons. That is not somebody who's going to come right away and jump right back into being a starting level anything. And this season is probably Lonzo Ball's last season in the Chicago Bulls uniform, regardless of how the season goes. And that's because when you look at the Bulls, yes, they're going rebuild. Unless Lonzo was willing to take a vet minimum contract, the Bulls just are in a place where they're ready to move on. And so because of that, it'd be different if the Bulls are still trying to compete. And I know we have Lonzo Ball family stands. There's one commenter now who comes in, it's Ball something is his username. And like this just has these long, eloquently stated things that are just about somehow Lonzo Ball coming back and making an impact. It's not going to happen. He's not Klay Thompson. The Bulls aren't in the situation that the Golden State Warriors were at that time. And Lonzo Ball coming back, he's going to be on a restriction, whether it's minutes, whether it's back-to-backs, it's going to be something. And he's not going to be, not to say he won't get minutes. If he's ready to go and the Bulls keep him on the roster, they'll play him because he can't help this team. But we got to come to the realization that this is probably the last season of Lonzo Ball in a Bulls uniform, if it even gets there, with hearing that the Bulls are also looking to dump the contract of Lonzo Ball. We got to come to the realization, holding out hope for something that just isn't going to come isn't something that I can get with. But we'll end up seeing what the future of Lonzo Ball is. I just had to mention that. Let's go ahead and get into this voicemail. This one's from 8 Live.
What up, my boy Haize? It's your boy 8 Live. You know it's been a while. Been really waiting to see what type of moves the Bulls is gonna make, man. Man, I really called in today. I guess kind of touch on when you were saying that, you know, talking about how the Bulls and Zach LaVine relationship is shattered, man. I don't know. At this point, I kind of hold a different opinion, man. I feel like most of this shit is really Zach's fault, man. I feel like once he got his contract, and of course, as soon as he signed with Clutch Sports, Zach got on some BS. He gave up on the team, talking about he wanted to leave when he already knew the makeup of the team. I really don't blame AK for Lonzo Ball getting injured. I feel like he could have, you know, I can't say that I feel like he could have got a different point guard because I was always of the mindset that Kobe was supposed to be the starting point guard, and you already know that. So I wasn't really tripping on AK not getting nobody else. We had Io, we had, you know, my boy, and I feel like they stepped up. I just feel like Zach went out like a mark, man. I feel like once he signed with Clutch Sports, I feel like Rich Paul got in his ear, and I feel like he wanted to get over there with LeBron and just get to a different team. Probably because of the way he felt the organization was going, or the way, or DeMar. I can't leave that out. So at this point, man, fuck Zach. To be honest with you, bro, I like what AK been doing. I don't blame him for believing in Vooch, believing in Zoe, believing in Demar. I'm not gonna blame him for that. I feel like he did what he could with what he had. When we had the the Drummonds and the Derrick Jones Jr., those players were supposed to work. I'm not gonna sit up here and look at AK after these dudes is always injured and they just didn't play up the part. I'm not gonna blame the organization for it. I just can't. I'm tired of doing it. Zach just wanted to do something different. He should have just been the man that said that, or just not signed the contract. Which of course he was gonna do that, but nah, man. I'm looking forward to the new young core. Fuck all the old dudes. I still got love for them and all that. But as far as just blaming AK for all this, I'm not saying that you did that. But people that say in the organization, no, them players did not work out. All them players that he got, that group that we had, the couple of little groups we had, they were supposed to work. They didn't. It is what it is. We moving on and moving on. Hey, man, good luck to us with what we get, you know what I'm saying, with these guys we got. And I'm ready to watch the young core. Win, lose, or whatever. I'm just tired of DeMar and Zach, man. Let them go and do what they do. But as they can see, the rest of the league ain't really messing with them like that. They need to be trying to be loyal to the Bulls because it's the Bulls' fault for believing in them, giving them decent contracts that these dudes don't want to pay. They don't want to pay that money for Zach and DeMar. But anyway, man, be red.
All right, 8 Lives. I won't even say harsh. Like, that's just your opinion, but I'm of two minds of what you said. On one hand, you say that, yeah, they just didn't work out, but that's still a failure of the GM. Like, you can say that, yeah, every signing the GM hopes that it's gonna work out, but if a signing does not work out, that is a failing of the GM. The GM's job is to improve the team. And how many transaction periods did AK and Eversley sit out? So no, I understand Zach LaVine's frustration because just because you can put on paper and say, well, yeah, these moves were supposed to work, but they didn't, that still contributes to the frustration of a player who wants to win. If that's what Zach LaVine is truly saying here, that he wants to win and that's the frustration, no, that still goes against the front office. The front office doesn't get a pass because the signing was supposed to work out and it didn't. You don't get a pass for that. The signing didn't work, which means that there goes your job did not work. So there it goes. So I can't give them passes for things not working, but I can understand that. Listen, like I've said many times, Zach and the front office have a fair share of the blame for where their relationship is. Not the ultimate destination of the team. That's another story, but still in that too, but in where their relationship is. And that's just where this thing sits. But I agree with you in the sense that it's time to move on. This front office has told us that they're ready to move on. Their moves has told us that they're ready to move on. The rumors have told us that they're ready to move on. It's time to move on. And that's what the Bulls are trying to do. How successful they will be, you got to have a partner to get it done. And we'll see if the Bulls can find that partner to get this thing done, and we'll see. But 8 Lives, thank you for leaving that voicemail. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you guys want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, like you heard on today's episode, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, and that's thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.